and what's happening. A pleasure to welcome into Midpoint a member of the Organizing Committee for Concerned Veterans for America and a former Marine who served her country honorably. Jessie Jane Duff joins us here on Midpoint, which hopefully will be the first of many times. Jessie Jane, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be your guest.
Well, let's put it this way. We're going to be talking about this for an awful long time because the Bergdahl story changes every single day. Now we are hearing even more information over the weekend, some new details on Bergdahl himself, the conditions he faced in captivity, how he's adjusting to freedom both physically and mentally. A lot of people made a statement about the fact that he did not want to talk to his family. But is that really much of a shock when you're sitting in the hospital in Germany and you're undergoing treatment for what you've been through?
Well, you know, it is very hard for me to estimate what it's like for somebody who's been incarcerated by the Taliban for the last 5 years. But, you know, my bigger concern is why did we release the 5 prisoners for him? I'm not going to try to question what condition this prisoner was under, what kind of duress he was under. That is yet to be seen. I've got a bigger issue. Why was he not declared a deserter and then given the opportunity to prove otherwise, instead of the administration doing a victory lap and declaring his service honorable, while meanwhile we know that there are classified documents out there that are declaring him otherwise. So that is the bigger issue. You know, so he's off in Germany saying he can't talk to his family, he's not ready, he's been through all this trauma. Okay, fine. But why did you leave?
Okay, then let's start right there. Let's get to your experience then as a member of the military. And you mentioned, why was he not declared a deserter? Now, we've heard a lot of the stories about the fact that he left. There have been a lot of his mates there who were on the ground with him who basically said that, yes, indeed, he did walk away. So, but there's a simple question. Why was he not declared a deserter? What was the military, the government, the administration waiting for in order to make this official?
I've gotten a variety of different inputs. Some people have felt that you got to let the evidence surface later, and before you can declare someone a deserter, that would have been the proper course of action. As far as the confidentiality or the agreements that some of these service members had signed, I'm going to give the Army somewhat of a benefit of the doubt that they didn't want this to become something that was causing a lot of disarray. And when you're ever having an investigation, yes, you do have elements of confidentiality going around investigations. However, I had gathered from day one that the oversight on General Petraeus' part or his team's part or maybe his general's part or his colonel's part had been that they didn't want to embarrass the family. That is some of the word I've gotten from the insiders that I know within the Pentagon. So, all right, so you now don't want to embarrass the family, but it's turned into a massive fiasco 5 years later that you cannot manage now. You can't reel back. You can't get the horse back in the barn because now you've got an administration that has gone out on a limb to say this was honorable service, has released 5 jihadists that have got extensive history with trying to kill Americans, extensive history, and now we are all sitting here thinking, what in the heck? This young man, although delusioned and probably should have never been in the Army, probably should have not been allowed to stay in Afghanistan, he walked off post, he did desert, and from my experience on active duty, this is like the second worst thing you could do outside of shooting your teammates. We know from the day we go to boot camp our general orders, and one of the general orders is that we will not leave our post until properly relieved. We understand that we are never to leave a base or a protected zone. We get that. We know that from day one, that we stand our feet on those yellow footprints in Marine Corps boot camp, and I would assume that the Army is quite similar.
Let me stop this, and something you just said here. You said never should have been in the Army in the first place. Now, I've heard this from a lot of other folks as well who consistently ask me not only about Bo Bergdahl, but others whom they say just may not be fit for military service. Does this now indicate something else that we need to do as we continue to build this military is pay much closer attention to the psyche of the people that are getting involved and are going out and protecting their country, going overseas?
Well, I wish it was that easy. The reality is
that's the point. It is not that easy. But tell us about that.
I wish it was. I wish it was. But I had been a recruiter on active duty, and I do recall what the process is like. You do ask a lot of extensive questions. You do try to get to the bottom of it. And many people are disqualified. In fact, more people cannot join the military that do. More often than not, people seem to think, well, this is your last resort. No. You had to have a high school diploma when you walked into my office. You have to pass an extensive array, a battery of tests. You also had to pass an extensive physical. So those things in themselves before you even get to boot camp, can weed out multiple people. Most of the people that walked into my office I had to reject. There were some kinds of flaws, whether it be drug use, criminal records, any type of indication. This young man probably did not have the psyche, but how do you find that out until it gets too far? So it does happen. That's a given. You're going to have a small percentage that will get into your service that is a bad apple, so to speak. Based upon his past, he did know how to live off of the land. He thought he was going to walk off that base and live off the land and become some type of guy that was going to be able to walk away from his post without any type of grievance in the future. Well, he's disillusioned. He's an illusional man, and he just doesn't have a grounding. I can't predict why some people go in the military. Some people think it'll turn them around. It won't. You have to desire to change yourself. It will give you the tools to accomplish your goals. But if you believe that the military in itself will change who you are, it won't. You have to desire that change. You have to have the opportunity to say to yourself, oh, right, I got to turn myself around if I want to be the honorable citizen that I chose to be and live up to the oath that I have taken.
Jessie, let's talk about the 5 detainees whom you mentioned too, because again, we're one of those shows, and hopefully I think we're probably one of the few that will decide to look at every side of the story and try to exact some sort of fact in between here. And as we look around, we continue to see a number of people, and certainly congressmen as well, elected officials, who will say, wait a minute now, these 5 guys, they weren't that far up the tree, really. I mean, to call them potential killers is simply just overstating the fact at this point. You are close to the situation. You help us understand all this. When you hear something like that, read something like that immediately, where they say, come on, guys, you're overstating these 5 former detainees, what's your reaction?
Oh, I get a little upset because,
A little upset? I would think you probably get a lot upset, actually.
Well, I do, but if I get a lot upset over everything, I probably would have a heart attack and never get my job done. The reality is I have to moderate my anger because there's so much to be annoyed over right now. The reality is that people will often throw also out there that Bush had released many people out of Guantanamo, and that's an exact example why we should not continue. The guys that were behind the Benghazi attack, one had been released out of Guantanamo. He had arranged that attack, okay? The second, the shoe bomber, behind that was a former Guantanamo prisoner. Okay, so this is a perfect example of why we got to pull back. One of the men that was released, Mohammed Abd al-Aziz al-Mujahid. I don't even know that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he had served as Osama bin Laden's bodyguard and was captured, and he basically had essentially told his brother, another bin Laden bodyguard, that he would go back into the fields. We have another one that is 33 years old, Al-Ahmed Mohammed al-Razi. He also served with Osama bin Laden and wrote his family boasting of his commitment to jihad. Another one that I'd heard about by Colonel Ralph Peters, a senator who spoke on the Kelly file, had explained, it was very interesting, that upon release, he said this is equal to raining down 100 more deaths with his release, indicating he was going to go back into the combat field of destroying and killing Americans. They've all made statements to that effect on some level, whether it was prior to going in, coming out. Their history has been nothing but pure hate towards Americans and our freedom.
Something that caught my attention, certainly when John Kerry made an appearance on one of the Sunday shows, I believe it was on the CNN show where he was defending the swap. He was talking about the fact that these detainees are in Qatar right now. He says, if they're violated, then we have the ability to be able to do things. We'll find them, basically, and I'm paraphrasing here. We'll find them, we'll know where they're at, no worries, we'll be able to take care of them. Doesn't that bother you a little bit? Because we miss a lot of people around the world, it seems. So to be able to see that we'll have that certainty to know where these guys are, it's a little bit disconcerting to people. I got about 30, 40 seconds here. Go ahead.
Well, whenever I hear a Secretary of State use the word baloney, I know he's lost what he wanted to say. He does not have any words to exactly articulate why he justified doing this. There is no justification. To give the attitude that we will be able to catch them, then why are we still at war? Why have we still had problems with the Taliban if it was that easy? Why haven't we destroyed all of them if it's that simple, Mr. Kerry? Because the reality is they're still killing us.
15 seconds. What do you think the administration's next move will be in order to ameliorate some of this furor?
They get 2 choices. They can continue to spread their lies and disillusionment, or they can own up to it and ensure that Bergdahl is court-martialed. And I hope they take the latter because they will redeem a lot of the confidence people have in them. Until then, no veteran, no active-duty military will have confidence in this administration to look out for their well-being.
I think that is fair indeed. We'll leave that as the last word. Jessie Jane Duff, it is a pleasure to have you here on Midpoint. Rest assured, we're going to do it a whole lot more often. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Take care now. When we return, I'll be joined by political strategist and columnist Mary Anna Mancuso, because we've talked about what's happening here with the Bergdahl exchange. There is still tremendous reaction to President Obama's justification